Hey gang, it is Wednesday. We're all a little bit lighter after paying taxes, but fear not, it is Hump Day, happy hour with Dennis in the Know. This is your backstage look at current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It's live, and it is over a delicious glass of Gary Farrell Pinot Noir. So anyway, we are live. We're over a cocktail. We've got a great guest tonight. I'm Dr. Jeff Horowitz. My co-host is that lovely lady, Dr. Jennifer Bell, otherwise known as JB. Dr. Chatty Duplantis may join us in just a little bit. Believe he's celebrating his father-in-law's 94th birthday.
That's crazy.
So yes, God bless and enjoy those moments for as long as you can hold on to them. So regardless, we're going to have some really great fun. We're going to have some great conversation. You know the routine. All of us are practicing dentists. We're all educators. We're all business owners. And our job is to bring all of you in the know. That's fine.
I got to hang out with Nate for a day. And while I really enjoyed him on our show prior to that, I genuinely enjoyed him in person and we got to spend some time together. And so I'm excited to see a friend, a colleague, someone I shared the back seat of Chad's car in, zooming all around Dallas. So,
all right, do we really need to hear these details?
All kosher, all kosher.
Yeah,
it was fine.
All right, got a new respect for Nate. Anyway, gang, JB talks about the one and only Nate Lawson, knowledgeable researcher, educator, and absolute materials guru. A lot of people chimed in today on the Facebook page with lots of great questions. So we will definitely have more questions than time, but gang out there, I want to say cheers to all of you. Welcome to our show tonight. And please feel free to type your questions in real time, because I'm sure if there's anything good up there, we're going to want to talk about it. So feel free to put a text in and let us know what you want to hear. But with that said, I think JB might have a little bit of news.
You want to talk a little bit about the news?
A little bit, because my day is just better the next day when I'm informed by news from you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
When I'm in the know.
In the know.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up, so the lecture that Chad and I did on Friday was a digital lecture talking about scanning and then 3D printing and this whole kind of workflow that you can have in your office. And so it reminded me that I really needed to bring up again and reiterate the fact that the FDA is really looking at 3D printing and the applications of 3D printing intraorally. So there's two applications, broadly speaking, within 3D printing. One is 3D printing for models and things that you're going to use for extraoral fabrication of things. And then now there's a whole host of biocompatible materials that you can 3D print for crowns. There are, the ceramic embedded resin crowns that you can now print, occlusal guards, and different restorations that you can now use 3D printing for, dentures included. So there's a big hullabaloo in the FDA right now about looking at 3D printing applications in the biocompatible world. And what does that mean for dentists as manufacturers of those biocompatible materials? This is a really hot topic and could be heavily regulated within dental offices. And so I just continue to encourage doctors to log on, get engaged, to figure out, especially if 3D printing has become a very big part or something you're genuinely curious about bringing into your practice. If the ADA or if the FDA starts to put a lot of heavy regulation on biocompatible materials and how we as dentists can use them, it may change the ROI of why we're buying into those 3D printers to begin with. So I think there's a huge opportunity to participate in the open comment period about 3D printing in general. So That's the first thing. The second thing is that the ADA is, they sent out a survey, and I don't know how they selected the individuals they sent it out for, but if you did happen to receive the survey, they're collecting a lot of data on fees, and they do this, I believe, on an annual basis to sort of get an understanding of the general population and fees and all the nuances related to that. And so if you are so inclined, it would be helpful to gather that data so that these build the databases. I don't know where all they go. There's a lot of things that happen, I think, behind the curtain sometimes when it comes to fees. But I do know that a lot of that data then feeds into these other databases that you can then pull that information to do demographic surveys of your area to make sure that you are in a range. And I did that not that long ago. I had to go through my Patterson rep to pull a fee survey of my, 4 zip codes that I'm around to kind of make sure that I was in a general norm of where everybody else was. And that was super helpful because we definitely were out of range on some things. And so it was really helpful to have that information. And I think the only way that we get that is for dentists to participate in those survey and data collection opportunities to pull that information out. So if you have that opportunity, I would encourage you to do that. The last thing is super interesting. So I was talking to you about this before the show, but there was a story that came out just this week about a man who accidentally inhaled, it looks like a carbide finishing burr. And the doctor was doing a filling restoration. And then the next thing they knew, the patient inhaled the entire burr. Not, I would think it'd be more likely to be the shearing off of, a 2 fused burr, like a carbide burr.
Right.
That's not a single manufactured piece. And then you get the head shear off. No, entire burr inhaled. And it was just an ill-timed cough. They sort of sucked it down. And so they didn't know if he swallowed it or inhaled it. Off he went. They found it on a scan or an x-ray that it was in the lung tissue. They had to go in and use the same instrumentation that they use for biopsy removal, like fine tissue biopsy, to remove it out. And all I could think of, Jeff, when I was looking at the story is that's a finishing burr. He or she, that doctor,
literally 5 minutes away.
At the end. And probably, if I know myself, was going back going, oh, let me just touch this one more time. Let me just get this little piece of flash, or it's good, but I could make it better. Let me just go do this. And then the next thing you know, that it's the fan and the guy's got a burr in his chest and it's not.
So that's one of those things that's totally probably not any dentist's fault in any way.
No.
I mean, we all know, like, sometimes the chuck will slip, and
that's right.
Especially in an auto chuck handpiece. But it's also one of those things that I do a lot of defense work as an expert witness, and that's just one of those things that when the malpractice attorney calls me, it's one of those things you kind of have to settle. The patient had a horrible thing happen, and they incurred a lot of medical expense, which should not be on them. It's one of those things that you just have to be as kind and as caring and as friendly, but it's not that the dentist necessarily did anything wrong. And maybe it includes the handpiece manufacturer. I don't know, but it's one of those things that you can't, it's not one of those things you can really argue.
Right.
It's
so the thing I will say is, first off, I appreciate the way that this particular article was written. The one I found on the story was from the Huffington Post. And I appreciate the fact that it didn't paint the dentist in some ill light, which is commonly how a lot of these articles are written, that we did something terrible and negligent and therefore should pay, the heavy price. And the patient, as interviewed in the article, also seemed to have a pretty reasonable attitude about the whole idea. But, it goes back to, I try to use isolates in my practice and encourage at least some type of throat barrier or something to prevent that. And nothing is foolproof, but, when patients are so resistant to that, you want to pull up articles like this to say, informed consent, I'm totally fine if you don't want to use the isolate. It makes my job a lot harder, but that's fine. But it also puts you at increased risk of and then you just start like, I could cut your tongue, I could cut your lip, you could swallow a burr, you could swallow a crown, you could swallow the crap that I'm ripping out of this tooth right now. Like, just listing all the things, and you wonder if you really could be that pragmatic. Would they just put the isolate in? Would they relent to isolation because they would recognize why, the value?
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, it's one of those things. Shizzle happens.
You want to tell us about our show?
So I'm so excited. I'm just bringing him right up. Everyone in the world knows who this guy is now. I am working, by the way, you're going to be so impressed with me. I'm working on multiple screens now. So instead of the paper taped all over the place, I've got multiple screens going. And look how I'm handling this. Look, and then Nate comes into the screen and poof, this is all happening. Nate Lawson, a man who needs no introduction. Dr. Lawson, great to see you. Sorry that I don't get the honor of being with JB and Chad and you. I always have to kind of watch from afar.
I saw you in Chicago in February, so not that long
I
ago.
wasn't there.
Yeah, but that's because JB refused to go. She had the choice. This is just another point of contention, JB.
It's stacking up on me, Nate. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you bringing that up.
And sorry I was late to get on here. So I don't know if you guys do you guys know I have a little baby? I have
when I last saw you, this was the news. This was just ebbing up.
So, congratulations. How is it going?
How awesome.
It's going really well. She's a little girl named Alana. She's 5 months. And so my wife is usually feeding her at this period of time, but I forgot that my wife had to work dinner tonight. So my parents are here now, feeding her and watching her and taking care of her as we're doing this. And I turn the monitor off so that we don't hear any screaming. My mom watches her during the day, so she's got this under control. You might hear a little screaming, but
we would love it. So that's. I mean, I don't want her screaming because I would worry about her, but
so the babies are live streaming now.
Yes. We actually just brought this on for baby Lawson. We don't want you, Nate. We want the baby.
Okay.
We want the baby. We want baby live stream.
You.
Yeah. What does she know about ceramics? I want to know.
Turn on the baby camera. So let's start here, Nate. Let's get right into it because there were so many great questions that came in on our Facebook page today about so many materials questions. What do you see right now as kind of the hottest topic in materials?
Yeah, I mean, JB pointed out something that's pretty hot right now, which is 3D printing of restorative materials. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I guess denture materials and temporary crowns, and even some people say now permanent crowns. I mean, the 3D printer, we got a 3D printer about like 2 years ago, and I kind of thought, well, what does this thing do? I thought it was like models basically and surgical guides, and I didn't really need any of that stuff. But now, then I started seeing more temporaries, and then now it like almost people are saying you could use these for permanent restorative materials. So we've been doing a decent amount of testing on those materials, and when the first temporary materials came out, there were tooth-colored 3D printed materials. It wasn't strength was an issue, but also brittleness. Like they had no, you you couldn't bend them, and they would just, would just fracture on you. There's newer classes of these materials that are coming out now that, they've incorporated some flexibility into the material, which I think is particularly good for the denture-based materials, like 3D printed denture-based materials. I think it's great to have some flexibility. And then with the crown materials, I don't know, it's not necessarily that you think you want flexibility, but maybe just some some toughness to the material that it can absorb. Like it's not like it absorbs a little energy before it fractures. So they are, yeah, there are new materials that I think they are making improvements in the 3D printed world that, I mean, I like right now, strength wise, they're like the strength of like, maybe like a Lava Ultimate or Namek or one of those kind of, almost at that kind of strength.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. Would you compare it to like at this point in their gens, like their generation materials? Do you think it's at least comparable to these ceramic modified resins?
Yeah, like I always I mean, essentially, like Lava Ultimate is just Filtech Supreme heat cured, and so I mean, I think they were able to call it a nano ceramic, so you could build it out as a ceramic crown, because I mean, a composite is basically just ceramic filler particles with resin,
right, in the matrix. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, those ones were essentially composite, and Namek was a little different. That was more like a porcelain with resin infusions to it. But yeah, I mean, they're kind of like, yeah, they're approaching that kind of strength. I mean, maybe a teeny bit higher than just a light cured composite. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a big focus. I mean, the thing about it is they're cheap. I mean, the resins aren't cheap. It's like, what is like $400 a bottle, but you can print a lot of.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can print the whole tray. So you could do, 40 units, whatever you can fit on the tray, if you need to print a bunch of stuff. So I guess that's where the economics of it comes through with 3D printing.
Well, and it's cheaper than mills. I mean, mills are expensive.
Oh yeah.
And,
yeah,
I own mills and I own 3D printers, and the maintenance of the mills is significantly higher than the printer.
It's interesting that you say that, JB, because and I used to be of this camp that said, all right, so I have some really firm thoughts on technology that and Chad and I go back and forth on this all the time, that in technology investment, my first investment would be cone beam CT. Second would be a 3D scanning technology for impression taking. I used to say third would be milling, and then fourth would be printing. And I really think printing right now supersedes milling at the point that we're at now. Because even the last time I was at IDS in not this last one, the one before, they were already showing some 3D printed zirconia materials. Which was way out there at the time. But it's coming. I mean, if they were able to have it there in Germany, 3 years ago, it's coming down the line. And I really we're using our 3D printer so much. And to your point, JB, we just had to have a replacement mill sent in because there is, it's so mechanical that things just break, and the maintenance is higher and the investment is more.
I appreciate your feedback on that, Nate, because I have wondered, the back of your mind still says, are they really comparable? Which is probably what people thought about milled restorations in office before, it really became like, there's always the back of your mind that's a little bit apprehensive about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, right. I mean, not I've never done a Lava Ultimate posterior. I've never done a lot of Ultimate anything, to be totally honest, because I don't have in-office milling we don't have that at the dental school. So we're sending everything off to the lab. We're going to send off to the lab. It's going to be zirconia or Emax. So, so we never really used these processed or what do we call them? Heat process resin composites like Lava Ultimate. Yeah.
So Nate, while we're I'm sorry, JB, but while we're on this topic, I want to ask this, because one of the questions that came in, and we hear this all the time. Who sent that? Adam Hodges sent this in on our Facebook page. Yeah. And what he wanted to know is, do you base your decision of materials on molar, bicuspid, anterior, aesthetic zone, or are there other factors that come into play? So curious to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a hard question. Yeah, Adam's question is basically
It's a loaded question. It's huge.
Yeah. What's the best material for an incisor, for premolar, and for a molar? I guess for me, I mean, I just I don't use that many materials. I mean, like within the zirconias, there's the 3Y strong opaque zirconias and the 5Y translucent, less strong zirconias. I use a lot of the 3Y strong zirconia for full contour crowns in the posterior, even premolars. I do a lot of, I've bought into a lot of this bonding, like partial coverage restoration. So like a lot of times now I'm looking at teeth and I'm figuring out a way to do an onlay or partial coverage on it. I'll be honest with you, sometimes when I go on lecture and stuff and I'm thinking about like my life as an academician, like I don't have to really make any money doing dentistry. If I was making money doing dentistry, I could see why doing partial coverage would be tricky, because retaining provisionals is challenging if you're not in office milling. How do you build them out can be challenging, and even designing them can sometimes be challenging. So I guess like to me, I get a lot of joy out of preserving that tooth structure and like doing those partial coverage restorations. They are, I think even for me, even after I've done more and more of them, they're still more challenging than doing a crown. But for those, I'm doing bonded EMAX, lithium disilicate, for the partial coverage in the posterior. And then in the anterior, my thought process is generally like, I always say for, monolithic EMAX or lithium disilicate in the anterior, unless the patient has discolored tooth preparations where you need to block out a discolored tooth, or if the patient has like a tight bite where they've got limited occlusal space, and so you could use zirconia at a little reduced thickness on the lingual and just layer porcelain on the facial. So it's not, that's about as much as I think about it personally about material selection is, especially when it comes down to single units.
Is there a time in the posterior where you would shy away from zirconia?
Yeah, I mean, maybe like a 3-unit bridge where I've got limited connector height.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would, that for me, I mean, the zirconia, and like if I've got zirconia, I've got limited interocclusal space, like 0.8 or something like that. What I do is just bond it, because bonding can increase the retention of your restoration, but additionally it can increase the fracture strength of the restoration by attaching it to that tooth substrate. So not that I have anything against, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, one of the things that's, I haven't done a metal-based crown. Well, I live in Alabama, so I've done a couple of anterior metal crowns, but like posterior metal-based crown in a long time. Part of it's just like the lab cost is a complete unknown to me, because I haven't done one in so long. And when I get the anterior one back, I'm like, oh my God, like, am I still making money on this? Yeah. And then no patient ever wants, I mean, no patient I've had has yet to ask for a gold posterior crown. So the one thing that I always think about, though, that I am going to miss all those PFMs is when I have to start replacing crowns. It's going to be so sad to me the day when there's no more PFM crowns to cut off and replace, because nothing's the better appointment than replacing a PFM.
Yeah.
It's easy to do.
So, yeah. So fun.
JB, I cut you off before. What were you
going
to say?
All I was going to say was I can see where 3D printing will maybe push us back as clinicians to onlays and inlays more commonly in the office, because the rate limiting steps in doing onlays and inlays are temporization. If you don't have in-office milling, you're not going to do it, because it's hard to maintain those temporaries. And 2, if the milling machine itself is the cost rate limiting step, if you're to compare a milling machine at, I don't know, $30,000 to $75,000, which is kind of the range, and you can get in a 3D printer for $5,000, and you can actually start doing some really great conservative dentistry with I think there's a huge opportunity there, if the biomaterials will support it, to get same-day dentistry back in the hands of dentists without having to go into such significant debt to be able to do it. I think we're back to the gold foil days, but with a totally different material at hand.
Chatty's here.
Oh, and now we can see your whole painting, Nate. It's so lovely.
Oh, yeah, this
I
is the one
love
that
it.
my wife made us buy.
Nice. And Chad's here.
Those are the best.
Hi, Chad.
Hey, everybody. I thought I'd step in for a few minutes. We're in the midst of a 94th birthday party for my father.
I told everybody. That's impressive.
I tell you, I miss my people, but man, you think I'm going to get away without saying hello to Nate? How awesome is that Nate's with us? Thank you so much, Nate.
Liver.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So things going all right? What did I miss? What questions have I missed so far?
All
We're
of
talking
them.
about 3D printing.
What's that?
What
No,
is the average speed of an African swallow? You missed that one.
10 to 16 meters per second or 24 miles per hour. That's the European varietal. I'm not sure on the African.
Is that for real?
That's like dead serious. I
We're
knew that.
What
right
is
off.
your favorite
Ray,
color?
duh. Come on.
I Googled it as soon as
Of
Jim
course
Richard
you
asked
did.
that. I was like, you
Okay.
smart ass. Why are you asking these questions?
Yeah,
So,
we did have some great questions. So I know what we've been kind of chatting about some of the questions that came in on the Facebook page today. So
Yeah,
can
one
I
of the
ask
things
a
I'm thinking.
question to Nate while I've got him here?
yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
So, JB, you and I were with Nate almost a year ago to the day.
Again with the me and JB and Nate
Yeah.
and the me and JB and Kelly and the me
Yeah.
and JB and what? Go ahead, Chad.
But
I wanna
Jeff
hear.
Jeff and I were together in Chicago, and we saw Nate. So there you go. So did anybody ask him about his new baby? Did I miss that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered that too.
Okay, good. I just wanted to see because you look a little older, dude. I just wanted to see if it's really aging you as much as it is. Yeah.
The craze in there.
Yeah. It used to be like, yeah, I can be on at 8:30, and this time it was like, Rachel will be in between feedings. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So
Yeah.
cool.
I was telling Jeff
Life
and
is
JB.
different.
Yeah, she's at work
It
right
will
now. She
age
does a
you.
work dinner, so she's not here. But one of the things I did want to say, we're talking about when JB brought up the point about doing partial coverage with 3D printed materials is like one of my big fears would be like, is that thing going to bond on there? So we did some bond studies recently to figure out how to bond them. Sandblasting and bonding agent seem to be like this. Like we thought that you'd have to do silane. You can do silane and bonding agent, but the big deal seemed to be sandblasting and bonding agent to bond to the 3D printed
And
materials.
then
I think I had a
just
pretty
resin
decent
cement.
bond actually.
So
What? Yeah, then
here's
a
a
resin
question
And just a
on
resin
that.
cement.
Yeah.
So a question on that, because there's a lot of these ceramic fillers that are being placed into the resin materials. Sarah Smart, just to name one. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there. So with these materials that have ceramic fillers, it does not. Did you find that it does not benefit the bond strength to silanate those after sandblasting?
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, it didn't hurt to do the silent. Like if you, so the worst is nothing. That was like, let's say that's 0 bond strength or whatever. So like bond strength of just sandblasting would be like 10. Sandblasting plus silane was like 10. So yeah, not much. Sandblasting plus silane plus adhesive, I think it was like 30. But just sandblasting and adhesive alone was like 30. So it was like.
So why do the silane?
Yeah.
So the question is though, is how many variations of this resin are there that's out right now?
Yeah, who knows? We had just tested, and I can't even totally remember which one it was. We just tested one, and that's what we found. But I'm trying to think if sandblasting is definitely important. We've done that with multiple. We did. There was a pros resident, Bright Chang, a great guy. He's did his master's project related to how to reline 3D printed temp materials and found that sandblasting was pretty key. He didn't look at primers, but he found that the sandblasting is more important. He also looked at like trying to roughen it up with the burr, and it seemed like sandblasting was pretty was a pretty efficient way to do it. So yeah, if I was gonna, I mean, with the limited information I got right now, I'm sure there's probably other published studies out there, but just from what we did, if I was gonna bond one, I'd sandblast it, bonding agent, and then use resin cement.
So what about do you see the ability? I mean, it's hard for a lot of us to grasp this, but do you see the ability to change the filler within the resin, and as time goes on, to where we'll see, like we see in the hybrid ceramics world, the various fillers and the resin matrices that are all handled similarly but differently, do you see the abilities to enhance or change the filler or increase the filler concentration in these?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I've yet to see any of these underneath an SEM just to see the filler, to see what they're talking about with filler. Because I was always in the impression when you 3D print stuff that you couldn't get a lot of filler in there. But you could see that with scanning electron microscope, but ours hasn't worked since November, which is unusual. It's been working for like 8 years straight. And then as soon as we get one, I do want to, I'd like to see what kind of fillers in a 3D printed material. I have never seen one in a brochure even.
Well, you think about it, the light's curing the resin. So if it's dispersed homogeneously and it's small enough in size, if it's kind of nano filled, I don't see why they couldn't change it. It's just, are they going to be able to get something like a Vita Anamic or something that's like 76 to 80% filled, which, even the Voco's 87% filled. I think there's a lot that remains to be seen, but it makes sense that you could cure the resin. I just know that they're talking about 3D printing zirconia down the road, and I can't grasp around how that could ever happen.
We were talking about that earlier, Chad.
I just can't grasp it. So sorry.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, I don't know if they can put like some kind of binder, like the powder in some kind of binder that gets burned out or something. So that then it burns out and all those particles fuse and sinter together. I've thought about that too. I have no idea. People always talk about 3D printing, that kind of stuff, and I have no idea.
I watched them print metal at Glidewell, which was pretty amazing. But
are those like beads? I think they get fused together or something like that when they 3D print metal.
It was so long ago. I say so long ago. It was 3 or 4 years ago, and I didn't really understand the whole process behind 3D printing, so I didn't know enough to ask at the time. But now I'd be fascinated. I was fascinated to watch it, but now I'd be fascinated to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and with 3D printing, it's the print, but then it's the cure. So you have to look at what's coming off the printer, but then ultimately, what's coming out of the cure machine. And that is something milling doesn't have. So you're able to use, the light manipulation to change properties.
But there's one more piece to that, which is the cleaning piece, because to Nate's point, a lot of these 3D printed materials didn't bond well to begin with because of the residues that were on them and not having gone through a proper, cleansing process. So, I think that there's so many variables in there that, I always talk about, I should say, John Coyce always talked about the dip phenomenon where, you get into something new and, you start excelling in this new area, but you have to have a dip with new technology because, with doing more of these procedures, you're going to learn of, some of the setbacks and some of the shortcomings of the materials and some of the lack of understanding that we have at this point.
Right.
Hey, did you guys see my post yesterday on Insta about the Shofu polishing kits that they've come out with?
What is it?
Did any of y'all see that?
I don't follow you, Chad.
Yeah, whatever. So anyways, Shofu came out with an acrylic polishing burr block, and I got it yesterday, and I put it to the test today on some 3D printed night guards, and it is pretty freaking fantastic.
Nice.
They just come out so smooth. It's a little bit more of a process, and it's more hand driven than mandrel. Than on a whatever that thing's called.
Lathe.
God, I'm losing my mind. But anyways, it was it's pretty phenomenal polishing process, and so it's going to be pretty cool.
I love it. How many burrs?
There's 2 acrylic burrs, 2 carbide acrylic burrs, and then there's there's 3 different sizes of 3 grits. So really, if you go through, you only need one of the acrylic carbide burrs, and then you just need to choose what size you need, the large, medium, or small, as far as the polishers are concerned. There's a coarse, medium, and a fine polisher beyond that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm a large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, Jeff, do you want to go to another one of our questions?
Maybe it's time. Exactly.
Yeah, I need to sneak back out to the party, but
All
I
right,
wanted to
Chatty.
say hi to Nate.
You
Good to
bring
see
out
you,
the
Chad.
worst in me, my friend.
Nate, we'll be in touch soon, bud. Good chatting with you, and I'll see you fools next week.
All right. Good seeing you, buddy.
Bye, Sharon.
Hey, love to the family. All right. So, is there, Nate, a material? This actually came from Kelly Tanner. Is there a most notable material, that has had the greatest impact maybe in the last year or so for you?
God, there's probably some. If anybody from a dental materials company ever watches this video, they're gonna be sitting there being like, "Oh, Nate, come on, please say fill in the blank for my company."
Say my company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
How about a group? It doesn't have to be necessarily a brand, but like,
yeah, yeah. I read that question, and I was sitting there, I read all the questions, and a lot of them I was sitting thinking over in my head of an answer to, and this is one of the ones I didn't honestly think of an answer to, because we do a lot of, my world is a little bit different in that, like, we get contracted research. So companies will come to us and they say, we have, new products. We want you to evaluate these properties of these products. Those are the ones that are in my head a lot, the ones that we're in the middle of evaluating. And then like clinic, I'll tell you something. I'll give you a hot tip. This is a material. It's not at all what you'd be thinking I'd talk about, but it is one of the coolest things that I found out about in the last year, and it's a floss. It's
sexy.
It's called Gorilla Floss. It's ultra high molecular weight polyethylene floss, and it's the strongest floss. It's 3 times stronger than floss tape. And like, if you're cleaning out interproximal contacts or something like that, this stuff is crazy. I debonded my lingual retainer using it, so that was like a disadvantage of it. But that stuff is nuts. That's one product I've got that everyone I've recommended to is like, Nate, that was cool. I didn't. It's not like I invented it. I just found out about it.
Polyethylene. So that's really interesting because, as everyone found out in a text that JB put up asking if our parents were dentists, and I had to answer no. My dad owned an underground sprinkler system company, and so I dug holes and put a lot of pipe in the ground, but one of the piping systems that we used was a polyethylene piping system. But on the polyethylene piping, it said not for potable water. So I'm curious about polyethylene and the ability to use it in the mouth.
It's it's not like it's not a product that's like I got off of eBay or something. It's like I
get that, yeah. But I wonder, because I thought that polyethylene was something that could not be used for anything to be internalized. So maybe it was just the way that they produced that particular product, or I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. That's random information, but it's just.
No, I don't know. I've never heard anything like that. I know that. I don't know. I'm sure that.
Jeff, it could come down to like FDA approval, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would think it would have to have had. It's not it's an Australian company that makes this, but they sell it. They're going to start they sell it through the place I get it from is a place called Dental Savings Club, which is from Canada, I think, because they were like the North American distributor. But I've heard they're going to sell it other places now too. So
Yeah.
it's got to be FDA approved.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my not what you thought. I was going to say floss.
Well,
But,
look, I wanted to talk to you about matrix bands tonight, but Chad said that wasn't sexy enough.
Oh, okay. Well, floss though.
Floss is
really
sexy
you
enough.
beat matrix bands with floss. I wanted to
If
talk
I
gold foil.
had said floss or matrix bands, what would you have chosen then, Jeff?
Gold foil.
Forget it. Forget
What
it.
else?
Okay. We did have another question that was actually a legitimate question from Harley, who's a great contributor on our site. And he said, material options for cervical caries that infringe on the tissue where perhaps gingivectomy is not ideal. So let's talk about restorative materials and that moisture barrier, that area that's tough for isolation.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. And this came up in our, we have a multidisciplinary seminars class at the dental school. And I found out that the endodontist and the periodontist love a material that I was not very familiar with, which is Restore from, I think, Denmat, which I think is some form of like compomer, or I'm not totally sure what it is about it, but they love that for doing the periodontists will do cervical restorations with Restore, I found out. And they say it's moisture tolerant and biocompatible. I don't really know what is special about that material that they seem to like it so much for doing subgingival preparations. I mean, personally, my go-to, like if I see like that sub-G caries underneath the crown, I mean, one thought I think about is silverdimine fluoride. I mean, if it's depending on like, if we're talking about something that's just holding the patient over until maybe a tooth is eventually extracted and an implant's placed, so just get a couple more years out of it, or maybe if the patient's older, and we're just trying to buy time, silverdimine fluoride, or resin modified glass on or glass ionomers. I mean, they're a lot more moisture tolerant than resin composites are, and they're very protective of the tooth structure from fluoride release. So I mean, I love glass ionomer, resin modified glass ionomer materials, and so I don't know why they, again, until this year I was not very familiar at all with Restore. I still have never even seen it or used it, but I do know that the periodontists seem to love that material, and endodontists.
I tried that material, and in my hands it didn't work great. And
JB, I'm like you.
I've used Fuji and the resin modified glass ionomers at the cervical margin for years and years and years with no issue. And in fact, I've been super surprised at their longevity. And Restore, and I don't know, maybe it's a restorative dentist. Restore and a restorative dentist, just at least this one, and maybe Jeff.
No, I found the same exact thing. I was like, this is what all the hoopla is about.
Something?
Yeah. I felt like I missed something too.
Yeah, like they just sort of fall out, and you're like, this is supposed to stick in the worst situation. I need something that's actually going to stick. And because if it would bond, I would use more retentive materials. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I've got another question that came from Drew Kuzma, which is having to do with there's a company out there, talking about a very unique monomer, MDPB monomer. Will you talk a little bit to that chemistry and whether or not it is proprietary?
Yeah. When I
get some feedback from somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if that's me. Well, I can't mute myself and talk, so I don't know. But yeah, when I first heard about MDPB, should I just keep on talking, or you think we should fix the echo? Well,
yeah, is it better now?
No. Maybe I have
It's funny, I don't hear it.
Oh, really?
Oh, do you hear it, Jeff?
I do, and I just muted myself, and it was still happening. Let me mute you and see what happens.
Okay, I'm closing every other window.
No, you're good, Nate. It's better now. It was
Oh, it's
JB,
better.
of course.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so like MDP was like
I like her
a
muted, by the way.
JB's the problem. Yeah, MDP was like a very famous molecule that came out that was like, I mean, Curari developed MDP, just like
Right.
methyl oil oxydecyl dihydrogen phosphate, that molecule for like bonding to, sticks to all kinds of stuff. It sticks to zirconia, titanium, base metal, but it also can stick to calcium and tooth structure. So that's what they incorporated into, I think when some of the patents ran out for MDP, that's when they could come up with a lot of these universal adhesives like the Scotch bonds, all bonds, adhes universals, all those things. And it was a very great molecule for incorporating the bonding agents because it could bond to calcium and tooth structure really well. And I think that's why we're starting to see some of these single bottle adhesives that are performing well. It's because they have 10 MDP in them. MDPB is something different, which I didn't even know. I think I learned about it, honestly. I think there was like an Instagram story from Miguel Ortiz or something. I was like, never even realized that it was different. But my understanding of MDPB is it's an antimicrobial monomer.
Right.
That's like one of these, I think it's some form of cautionary ammonia compound. Like it's got an electric charge to like repel bacteria or break bacterial walls. So as far as like the advantage of using the 10 MDPB, I'm not as familiar with that data to show that has an antibacterial effect. It'd be a tough thing, I think, to realize from a clinical trial. And then I don't know how, I'm not exactly sure. We plated some on like on a well to try to see if it killed any bacteria, but that wasn't an official test. We couldn't necessarily kill any bacteria, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I just had a little plate of bacteria. So yeah, I don't know as much about the benefits of that particular molecule, the 10 MD, the MDPB, but the 10 MDP, I feel like that's a legitimate thing. I really do think that the regular MDP is like a big deal. One of the really interesting things I've been thinking about is every year all the nerds, like the big nerd party for dental research, is this AADR meeting, which is in March usually. And so it was virtual again this year, and I was attending that by someone I had read a lot. Her name is Alessandra, I can never pronounce it, Lagaceras. She's a Brazilian researcher, and I've always read a lot of her papers. She does a lot of clinical trials on bonding agents, and I was super excited to see her presentation. And she was talking about the value of laboratory studies versus clinical trials, specifically when it comes to bonding agents, because bonding agents are like a religion to people. I mean, like people argue all day long about the best bonding agent. And she brought up a lot of points about how a lot of it comes from the hundreds and maybe thousands of research that's been done with bond strength testing. And she was trying to say that how sometimes it just really doesn't have much relevance when it comes down to clinical trials, and clinical trials are really where you get better evidence for like bonding agents. But the tough thing, and so she was trying to make that point at the end of the meeting, that we need to be doing clinical trials on all these bonding agents. And I was like, the thing you don't understand is that she's in Brazil, and in Brazil, it's I brought up the question. I said, you can do these clinical trials. In the United States, it's very difficult for us to do a clinical trial to compare two different bonding agents. It's got to be sponsored by a company. It's over $100,000 study. It probably takes about 6 years to perform, and then another couple of years to get the data out there. And so, as far as like, we don't have, even though there's a lot of bond strength studies, there's bond strength studies forever. I felt like it's pretty hard to say like this bonding agent is 100% completely the best, because we're just don't have that many clinical trials to look at current generation of adhesives. So like, I don't know. Even though I lecture about bonding materials, like bonding materials, it's just like I've never felt like getting into an argument with anybody about saying this bonding agent is better than this bonding agent.
Yeah,
and it made me really nice to see.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, and there's so much clinical relevance to experience and having used a material over so many years and having had success with it. But one question that I do have though about MDP. So, there are several universal bonding agents that include 10 MDP. as you mentioned, like Albond, like Scotch Bond, Universal. And one of the questions that always seems to come up from people is like, so are you sure I don't need to be priming the inside of my crown with a separate metal primer before I put the bonding agent in? I mean, that seems to be a really common question. And honestly, those are questions that are better left for people like you, more so than me, who doesn't understand the chemistry at the level that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand the chemistry. I mean, I don't understand the chemistry. Like, it's always funny because like we gave a research presentation for the dental students, and like dental materials researchers, like my background is in engineering, not in chemistry. So like, as far as understanding chemistry, I have no idea. But all we know is like even though I say bond strength data is not always useful for like bonding agents, I think that specifically for tooth, because teeth are so complicated and there's enzymes in there, and like bond, when I'm looking at bond strength to ceramics, that's a little bit easier question, I feel like, to answer, because it's just a ceramic and you can treat it and you can bond to it and you can kind of get an idea of
right
how well that works. So like that question has been answered. I mean, there's been a number of studies basically looking at the universal adhesive, and when it comes to like bonding to zirconia with the 10 MDP in a universal adhesive, I think there's maybe Kern would be maybe one of the people that's published on this pretty extensively and showing that seems to work fine. When we do it in our lab, we bond a zirconia with any one of those universal adhesives you mentioned without applying a separate MDP primer. It seems to work fine. And honestly, even putting 10 MDP into a cement can be pretty effective at being able to get a bond to zirconia. I think the one that's a little trickier is bonding to Emax with with the universal adhesive that contains silane. That's where you get more problems.
Yeah.
But the zirconia doesn't seem to be as difficult to.
Thanks. So that's a question that comes up all the time, and I'm reluctant to answer it because I honestly don't know. And I say, the data that I've seen suggests that the MDP primer is okay, but I don't, I just don't have enough data to say, yeah, you need to be doing a separate application on the crown or anything. So that was actually very helpful information.
Sure.
Oh, she's still muted. I'm going to unmute JB.
Still muted. Oh, there you go.
I don't know why we have this issue on
speak.
StreamYard. It'll go fine for a while, and then someone starts to create an echo. It's a really weird phenomenon. We had one additional question from Facebook that I wanted to make sure we got because he is watching tonight, and that was glass ionomer versus resin, modified glass ionomer versus resin for your, he put in quotation, retentive preps, pros, cons. So I'm assuming best preps for best types of cements. And where is glass ionomers in all of this now that we have resin glass ionomers?
Yeah, that's a great. So I had always been under the assumption, under the assumption that the incorporation of the 10% resin or so in a resin modified glass ionomer was only to make it light curable, that it didn't impart any additional strength to the material. And I used to tell people that for years, like, when I say years, like 3 years. And then we did I'm so old that I've been doing this for years and years. But yeah, for several years I'd say that because I just didn't know. I just didn't know. And then we had a couple dental students do a research project where they looked at Fuji 2, Fuji 9, and Equia and compared strength and fluoride release and a bunch of these properties that I was curious about. And really the Fuji 2 is stronger than Fuji 9. Like, resin modified glass ionomer is stronger than the glass ionomer material, but oddly, the Fuji 9 is more wear resistant than Fuji 2. It doesn't make sense. People told me that and I didn't believe it. And then we tested wear and we tested strength. So that was odd. And the glass ionomer, the Fuji 9 does release a little bit more fluoride. That being said, I think the fluoride release from Fuji 2 is pretty great, and you can recharge it with fluoride. So to me, honestly, just in my mind, it comes down a little bit to just handling. Like I think the Fuji9, I mean, we just use a lot of GC products when it comes to these. So like, but I guess anyhow, the Fuji9, when you handle it, it's a little bit more packable, but you have to wait for it to, self-cure. Although we just had, there was a pediatric dentist Jed Best, that came and just visited us yesterday, and he was testing some things showing that if you heat a glass ionomer with a curing light, that it can speed up the cure of a conventional glass ionomer from the heat. But yeah, and then both of those, glass ionomer and resin modified glass ionomer, I like those for when you have problems with moisture, having difficulty isolating from moisture, and if you want to have a very high characteristic patient. But the disadvantage is they stain, and then they're not, some people say you can use them for load bearing restorations. Like maybe if I had like a small class 1, I could see potentially using it in there. But like I would never do like a class 2. Like I've seen marginal ridges fracture, and so not really load bearing with those.
Don't take us back to the Miracle Mix days.
Yeah, I've heard that, but I don't know that from any personal experience.
Oh, you weren't even around for Miracle Mix. Let's just take glass ionomer and we'll put a little bit of silver in there and kind of mix it with
like the tie core.
Yeah, exactly. Just
great idea. Was actually a pretty great material.
Yeah, I used tie core back in the day. Yeah. But that was a resin material, wasn't glass ionomer with all that silver in it. So, all right. Well, we got to wrap it up. We've had a great talk, Nate. There will be a part 3 because we just love hanging out.
Just like having you here, Nate.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, JB. It was good talking to you guys.
Alabama's
get back to that baby.
Yeah, I know. I think my wife, since we've been talking, my wife came home now, and I think she took the monitor away from me, but I don't hear any crying, so she must be doing well.
It's all good.
I think you're about to enter the sweet spot. That's a good test. 6 months to 18 months is like this beautiful. Okay. They love you, and it's just really sweet, and they're smiling all the time and all that. And then 18 months, they start to get a little mind of their own, and it's a fun little adventure after that.
There you go.
And then you're just dumb enough to get pregnant with the second one. That's what happens. They lull you into this beautiful place because they're such sweet little beings. And then you'll be in this situation. You're like, we got this. We've nailed this. This kid is great. It's breathing. We're doing an awesome job. We should have 12. Let's go ahead and get pregnant with the next one. And then they turn into a terrorist. And you're pregnant with your next one going, what have we done? This is a terrible idea.
I've never heard that before, but yeah, that's kind of our plan.
Right. Well, I have 3 years apart, and every 18 months, I was like, we got this sweet spot, rocking and rolling.
Piece of cake. Now, our first one was treacherous enough that it took us 5 years to get the courage again. But you know what? At some point, the courage does come back, no matter what.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. All right, Nate. Great to see you, buddy. Good luck with everything. Enjoy that beautiful baby, and great to see you again.
Thanks so much. See you guys. Bye, Jeff.
All right. Have a good one. JB, why don't you close us out? I do have one thing I want to say. Thank you, everyone, for inviting your friends. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of Denison. We had another over 100 new member week. How great is that?
It's so great. And I think it's continuing to at least hopefully show that we're building a community of folks who enjoy hanging out with one another. And, the summation of what we have, I think actually was said really well a couple of weeks ago by a good friend of ours, Paul. And he said, everybody else is like the CE class, right? They have the speakers on. We're the after-hours CE class happening at the bar. So when everybody goes and they're sharing their war stories and they're commiserating together and there's fellowship, there's incredible learning that happens. You and I both know that it's the after hours, the
No doubt.
5 to ish, whatever time it wraps up. It depends on where we are. And like so much amazing stuff happens during that time period. And I think DINKs is a great example of that. So
I thought that was a great analogy too. And
I think
the problem with the after, with the after CE at the bar is retention. It's like I learned so many great things, but I only remember half of them.
Right. That's why we have digital media now that's recording
You can replay.
Our after hours event, so we can go back and rewatch it and go, oh, I should have written that down. Like, hold on 1 second. Let me just write that down.
Yeah,
So,
I'm coming with one of those CVS notepads. Oh,
Hey,
Nate's back.
I don't know.
Did you do that?
Can I? If I since I am back, can I? There's one thing. Can I mention one thing? And is it okay to put in just a plug for like a webinar thing?
Please.
Okay. Doing this. Someone asked if I could do this, and it should be fun. It's like a webinar with the hands-on live. And I know you guys know
that's cool.
them. Yeah, I'm reading. It's like May 25th. So it's.
You want to
that
send
was
me
it.
that? Send me that
I'll send you
info
that.
and we'll
Yeah,
post it
send us the
tomorrow.
info and we'll post it as well, Nate.
What's the topic?
It's class 2 composites. It's the first time I'm ever going to do like a hands-on. They send me an Epson thing and I'll like do it in front of my, hopefully not screw everything up. We'll see how that goes.
Are you stressed?
I'm not over. I don't get too stressed. I feel like the babies help but I am, there's a decent chance I'll have some flubs along the way, but it'll be fun. But I did not mean to put myself back in. I don't know if
We're so glad you did.
We're glad you did. And yeah, that was awesome. And I'm glad everybody gets that opportunity.
How does he have more control than I do?
Exactly.
Like, I can't do anything. I got muted halfway through and he's
could have
bringing
unmuted
himself in and
yourself.
out like he owns the place.
You have the power to mute yourself.
That I know.
I'm gonna plug my baby in too. She's joining us. Let me. No, I'm just joking. I don't know.
Oh man, you got me really excited.
All right,
I'll take
Nate.
myself out. I'm sorry.
Night, Nate.
Have a good one. That's funny.
I love that.
But that worked out really well. Okay, close us out, JB.
I love you all very much. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Thanks, Nate, for coming on twice and being with us. We loved it. Chatty, we miss you, but happy 94th birthday.
Not to Chad, to his father-in-law.
I kind of wanted to leave it out there. See how it stuck. Happy 94th birthday to Chad's father-in-law. And guys, thanks so much for being here. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Have a great week.